Video.
Started.
All right, well, welcome everyone to another Apache OpenWhisk Tech Interchange, August 15th, 2018. Our agenda is pretty light today, but we've got a couple things. We're going to do a website update, the OpenWhisk website update. I'll have just a short update on Knative and kind of what we're doing there. Marcus is going to talk about his proposal in the dev list for future architecture of OpenWhisk as we kind of look past the current release and into the next step. And then if there's anyone on the call with some other topics, I think we'll have time. And then finally, we want to make sure we secure a moderator for the next call before we finish. So with that said, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Matt to go over the new website updates.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. This doesn't have to be long. I thank everybody for sending us issues and comments and PRs, including Ben, Justin, Carlos, and our mentor Bertrand. Party and I have been working to prioritize all the incoming issues and divide them up amongst ourselves. We continue to improve the graphics based upon comments, improve the documentation. So we have some PRs going in this morning, so the website should look like this after today. We've improved the indexing and menuing. We've added a project map. Pretty added that recently. She's working on the FAQ now. We didn't know there's a tool from Apache that checks our website with regexes, and so now we added a bunch of links and legal stuff to the bottom. Make sure we're compliant, and things are just shaping up nicely. And thanks, and keep the issues coming and comments coming and PRs. And apparently someone created a new Slack channel, so we'll start watching that as well. But we basically want to make this the place everyone feels comfortable saying, go to the website, openwhisk.org, and that's the lobby that you go to get direction to go to all the other places in our project. And we've also we're not stopping there. We're actually going to, after this, all the issues are addressed. I cleaned up the wiki already. We're trying to make sure that we don't have redundant information in places, and that certain information, the repos contain good information. We have templates that we're going to be creating for the runtimes and clients. So when you go from here to there, you have the same experience at every repo. So that's our future goal beyond just completing all the issues that are open right now. That's all.
Great. Any questions or comments for Matt about the website update? All right. Thank you, Matt. The new website looks great, and my mobile data appreciates the image resizing on the homepage there.
We shrunk all the images thanks to that comment. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. For a Knative update, I can share my screen again, although there's not much here. The main thing I'll show you on the screen, and I'll put the link to, is we're continuing at Red Hat. We have part of our team that's exploring what does OpenWhisk on Knative look like from not from a like OpenWhisk needs to do this standpoint, but from a architectural standpoint, what we need to change in OpenWhisk to support Knative. So we have a bare bones project that aims to do that. Again, it's a prototype to help us inform things you'll see in a little bit, like Marcus's architectural proposal, right? We want to understand what is it, how do things map, how do things fit in. So we have a little video I'll put the link to in the chat, a demo of some of our latest work on that. I'm not going to play it here. I'm just going to put the link to it for us in a minute. And that's a demo of where we are with that prototype. Essentially, we have OpenWhisk triggers and rules and actions in Node and Python mapping to Knative features. And we're working on Java actions next, and as well as some other interesting things, two-way, so that things created in Knative can be triggered from OpenWhisk, for example. So again, that's a prototype we're looking at. We'd love feedback on. The goal being to inform, how we take advantage of Knative on top of OpenWhisk and the OpenWhisk project itself in the future. And that's kind of the only update I have on that front. If there's any questions or comments about Knative, I'd be happy to take those, and I'll paste the link to that video for you.
I'd like to leave a few words about Knative itself,
Sure.
especially on the dev list on my latest proposal. There has been a little bit of discussion on good for this, and it might not be good for that functions, for instance, with a single concurrency mode. And to give a little bit of background on that, I'm specifically working inside the Knative community right now on actually fixing those problems over there, so to say, from an OpenWhisk point of view. So I'm not entirely sure if the point in time statement is true. It is not good for certain things as of today. Actually, it is not good for many things as of today in terms of production readiness. But that will change over time, and the focus is certainly there over there in Knative.
Right. So this is a long-term effort, right? This is not a short-term thing. So, but we're trying to make sure that the things that OpenWhisk is learning, Knative, those get into Knative, right? So that Kubernetes becomes a better place to run functions, and therefore OpenWhisk runs better on Kubernetes is the long-term goal. But yeah, there's a lot of work to get there. All right. Well, if there's no other questions or comments on that, we can segue into, Marcus, since you brought that up anyway, the new architecture proposal you have.
Yeah, I released yesterday a revision of the proposal that essentially tries to pull apart certain things in OpenWhisk, especially what I called a user-facing part, where all the abstractions that we want to have are basically included, like actions, like triggers, how do they interact with each other, how do sequences work, and stuff like that. And then I extracted basically all the concerns that are related to actually execution of functions. And I did that to be able to draw a picture where we can exchange that execution layer to be either backed by Kubernetes, Mesos, raw VMs, or maybe even, thanks for putting it up, or even in that sense, you can now take the bottom box away and put Knative in there. And essentially that from an invocation standpoint, that should work. Now, obviously, like creating actions and stuff will be different on Knative. So that there's there might be other abstractions needed in that sense. But looking from an execution point of view, that should give you the ability to swap and replace execution systems. And I think that's a useful abstraction to have, to be able to swap that out to a full extent, because I think that makes integrating Knative easier and doesn't diverge so much from or maybe if we choose to implement something like this, wouldn't diverge so much from the core OpenWhisk, so to say. Yeah, that's the first bit. And the second bit I wanted to mention is the discussion on the dev list is starting to go into details right now, and I was wondering if there's agreement on certain points that this architecture is trying to change. Obviously, these agreements will be done on the dev list, but I was wondering, because I'm kind of hitting a dead end in terms of how good I am doing open source proposals as big as this. And I was wondering if it's about time to say, okay, let's vote or something, or however we define agreement. That for example, we want to have the user containers exposed via HTTP and no longer via Kafka, and stuff like that, to get those sorted, and then to be able to build working groups where we say, for instance, the routing layer is a huge topic of discussion. The blue boxes, essentially, as you see in this picture. If we define a certain discussion just for that routing layer, so we can focus the discussion on that. If that makes any sense, what I'm saying.
Yeah, Marcus, I think that makes sense, and I think the Apache answer for that probably is what we got to do is kick off an email thread on the dev list about the routing layer, right? And try to do it that way. To pick up, sort of drill into topics, create new mail threads, and deal with that. Deal with it that way. I tried to do something similar with logging yesterday because I think we have to make progress on logging for any of this stuff to actually really come to fruition.
Yeah, I agree. And all the discussion on this proposal actually seemed to revolve around the routing layer. Like, I at least my gut feeling was that nobody really questioned the HTTP connection from controller to the user container or something like that. That was never really questioned. The only questions were around details of the routing layer.
Right, and I think too the just figuring out the priority as far as community is concerned around, we've got part of a 0.90 release. There's still more to come, right, to get all of OpenWhisk released, and then figuring out like what's the priority to drive to a 1.0 or what's the priority to. I think we have to have the discussion in the community about what does the community desire 1.0 of what's out there today to become stable before there are a lot of work's put into what you might call like a 2.0, right? A new architecture iteration that learns from what we have today and kind of moves it forward into the future. So those kind of discussions probably need to happen as well.
Right. Yeah, actually, that was one of the goals of this proposal was to drive a roadmap discussion, or
right.
At least to initiate a roadmap discussion, so to say.
Right. And I guess some of this is probably, maybe Matt can comment on this, but I don't really care very much versus a 1.0 versus 2.0 thing, but it'd be nice to drive out of incubation, right? So what do we need to do to get this project actually out of the incubator status?
Yes. So my general opinion is that, and this goes in accordance to Apache versioning, is that when you start going to a 1.0, you're saying that all of your APIs and interfaces are well known, and then you make conscious decisions if you break or change the signature of those interfaces about major versions, and that you promise basically if you stay within a major version, you maintain compatibility. My biggest problem is, first of all, as Dave Grove pointed out, is we're not generally released. We did one repo because we had a big discussion that maybe Apache was scared of all these repos that we had because it's new to them. But what Vincent is trying to do now that he's back from paternity leave, congratulations, Vincent, is try to get all the remaining repos that are all tied together, release under 0.90. That is what Vincent's trying to do, and he appreciates any help getting those votes completed and through the system. But what I talked to Roderick about privately on Slack last week was we don't have a good documentation for what our interfaces are, and which things constitute a 1.0 release. So I think that, like, we haven't documented our SPIs. We need a consistent page where we all agree and vote and say, these are our interfaces that after 1.0, these don't change. And if any of these things change as a community, we have to decide to go to 2.0 or how to make sure that those signatures, those interfaces are backwards compatible. That's what we have to do. Somebody has to take that work on to document those interfaces. It's my opinion.
Is a 1.0 needed for driving out of incubation?
Yeah, that was my question too. It seems to me that process, right?
It's not. Carlos can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically we have to have there's a maturity model that we have to review. I think that we have to at least reach a release where we have all of the components generally released, and we're not there yet. We kind of faked it out and we hand waved, and we have still pulling things from Docker Hub. That's not a real genuine release. So I think we need to get all the runtimes, the clients, and everything that go together for 0.90 that work on the same interface, even though they're not documented, out there together. So if you grabbed it all 2 years from now, it all works together.
Yeah, we just need to prove that we follow the Apache way. We can do releases. We can put these source TG TGZ files, and the way we construct these TGZ files are using the Apache way, like signatures, we put it in the repo, we are voting, everybody's agreement, and also like this type of discussions that we're having in the dev list, showing that nothing is happening backdoors, everything's happening in dev list. If there's somebody that says -1 or some certain it gets discussed. If not, then you continue signing agreement and you continue on with the work. And in terms of API stability, that's more of who's the consumer, right, of certain components. We can go simple, saying that the Swagger API and the core API is the API versioning, and we keep that stable, and then and I think most of this new architecture is trying to keep some of those idioms and promises to the end user, right? Even if we change the whole backend. An action is a compute thing, a trigger is a fire thing, a rule is a rule.
Right.
You write code, and it automatically scales. I think we're not breaking that promise.
Yeah, I agree with Carlos. We have to decide as a community who our audience is. If it's just the end user consumer, then maybe just the Swagger is enough. But we still have to document.
Yeah, I agree.
But if our consumers, the operators, and we have operators here, we have people actually running. So if we care about versioning all the plugin points, all the extensions, all those places, if we should do that.
I think I can show maturity by just user-facing API and graduates. Operators, like, I guess we're hands full, and we can decide ourselves on.
Apache cares more about processes. Carl's absolutely correct. They care if we do all the legal stuff.
I can graduate with 0.9 and say that the API is the surface layer, and users can keep using the CLI, kind of like the proven points, and we're happy to keep that. That surface area stable, right?
Yeah, I just realized that, I just worry that people on this call are operators, and I don't know who. I know like people that are using OpenWhisk, like neighbor people in South Korea. Maybe they're relying on that interface to stay consistent, and we'd be breaking them if we didn't somehow document that or consider that going forward.
Right. I think it's a fair point that nobody consuming or using Apache OpenWhisk is a pure user, right? Because Apache OpenWhisk is not a hosted service that you just use. Apache OpenWhisk is a set of things that you then deploy. So every single one of our users of the Apache project is an operator, I think, right? Because they got to deploy it somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like the deployment model, right? Like the Ansible deployment model and the Kubernetes model. I think those, maybe there's the two stable paths, right? To deploy and operate this in a consistent manner. And if something's going to break, we just need to version this thing appropriately. Grade 1.0 or grade 2.0 for the different modules, I guess. That's why it's good to have different modules and different repos.
Right. So this sounds like a discussion that we need to have on the dev list is, there's still things to be done for 0.90 to be fully released in every module, and then we need to think about what is our API surface that we have compatibility with as we move towards a 1.0 or whatever comes beyond that. So we know when we need to bump versions. And then separately is let's think past the current model and look towards the future. And we'll have to figure out, what kind of parallelism we can do there or not, or whether we need to make a priority and just do one thing and then the other, or how that needs to work.
Yeah, I mean, like Vincent is, now he's back. He's going to try and drive the 0.9 stuff to 0 stuff to completion. He's posting the dev list, his intentions, his process. He's going to release things in groups. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have one giant tar file with tar files inside of it, so we don't scare Apache. That's the end goal. But he's back. He's going to drive that.
Okay.
Together have to drive the other discussion. Yeah.
Well, just one more thing I want to add on top of the versionings. If we want to really push like 1.0 as a really milestone, we have to change our, I have to say that package, at least in the main module. Currently, our naming convention is to start with like whisk.core.something. We have to change it into org.apache.openwhisk or something like that. That could be. I have to say, it's a major milestone. We have to refactor if we want to really push 1.0 as the next milestone for our main module. That's one thing. Another thing is that as we all know, we have like 13 modules to be released for the very first time as a group, as a whole group. But our main module has been released, which is good, which is excellent. But like the modules following that has actually got a slump of attentions, both in our OpenWhisk community and the Apache. I will post the mail for vote regarding CLI and client Go for, I think, over a week. I only received one vote in Apache. I was wondering if anybody can know somebody from Apache community.
I think that we need to plow ahead. I think that if Apache's, the incubator PMC is sleeping and you followed all the rules and you post the votes and you post the notices correctly, keep going. Ask for forgiveness, later if they say, you say, well, I followed all the rules. I mean, we just have to keep going. We can't keep asking, did you really want to vote and prolong votes for 2 weeks? That's silly.
Which one is we're talking about?
No, we just
our vote?
No, incubator PMC.
It's from Apache. Apache has been open there for over a week. Only received one, but at least it's a positive vote. Only one.
All Apache. When you say Apache, that doesn't mean anything.
Incubator
IPMC?
Yeah, IPMC.
Okay, so it's not the PPMC. Oh, okay.
It's IPMC.
Okay, yeah, hassle them and ask for our mentors to hassle them.
Yeah, I did.
We did. We talked to Vincent last week, and he's been doing that.
Still waiting for the response.
Welcome to Apache.
Yeah, welcome to Apache.
And Vincent declare that vote closed, or is that something that IPM?
Declare it closed and ask for forgiveness. Just move plowing forward and let them stop us and go back. That's my view right now.
Yeah, if Bertrand said that that's okay, I'm good. If Bertrand said that it's not okay, then he needs to help. That's why we have mentors.
Yeah.
Bertrand's been answering email today, so.
Yep. And Jimmy's our mentor and Isabel, so we have 3 mentors.
All right.
Yeah, and that's kind of the double-edged sword.
Yeah, we cannot go move forward like that if they don't respond. That's the Apache way, so I would say no.
Right. That's doing the small releases individual. I know there's a lot of discussion on that, right? Do everything as a big release or a small release for each component. And this is kind of the things you'll run into with a bunch of small releases is people have to vote and release 13 times.
So I try to release them.
This is why we're going to have one
by groups. It will be either one module or 2 modules. So I can reduce emails from 13 to 5 or 6. That's just my plan to release for the very first time of all the modules.
Yeah. So it's a middle ground. So originally we're going to release all at once, and we were set up to do that. We went back.
We're going to turn back.
Yeah. So I think he's doing it in groups. I think that we have to keep going on that plan, do it in 5 or 6 groups, and get it done. Just push it through. Even if we have to have concurrent, even if you want to do the votes concurrently, you don't have to do them sequentially. To do them concurrently if you want.
Yep.
Well, we can do actually in parallel in our dev list, in our OpenWhisk dev list, but eventually we have to push them outside to the IPMC for vote.
That's fine.
Well, there's going to be a bottleneck somewhere.
Well, we're plowing through. If you follow all the rules and you post correctly, and they don't comment, and our mentors don't encourage them to, then we're doing everything as a community we can. Just keep going, Vincent. Just keep going.
Okay.
Push through and
it looks like Justin is the Justin voted +1. Bertrand can vote. Bertrand's vote counts. He doesn't have to vote twice, but he counts because he's part of IPMC. I want to say. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have 2 votes. So we need only 1 more vote from the IPMC. And
all right.
yeah, and Jim can help. Jim is also volunteer to be our mentors.
Okay.
So yeah, use our mentors. Ping them, ask them. If you don't ask our mentors, they will not see the email. So.
Yeah, and then on the dev list, we'll make sure you can hassle any of us if the vote comes up and people are on vacation or whatever. We have enough people that can vote on the dev list for sure to get past that stage, no problem.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll see if I can maybe try to get into the IPMC. Maybe that's an idea.
Hopefully this is a first time release problem, right? Like from then I assume it will get easier after the first one, which is why
No, not after the first one, but after graduation. That's why it's
not
very important.
necessarily.
After graduation, it gets
looks like
easier.
that's the nature. That's the nature of Apache about.
Well, the thing I wanted to say was right now, because we're incubating, we have to do 2 votes. One is in our group OpenWhisk, and then another one on IPMC. After graduation, we don't have to ask the IPMC because we already are trained to follow the rules and do releases properly and legally and fairness. So it will be, and as we add more people to the PPMC, and that's why it's a good thing to have people in the PMC when we become PMC. Then there's more persons to vote and those type of things. But sometimes it dry out because we have 20 people as PMCs and then like only 2 are like voting. And but yeah, it doesn't solve the problem, but it gets a little bit better after graduation. So that's why it's important to prove that we can graduate.
Right, graduate.
All right. So we can continue this discussion on the dev list as needed as far as whatever help we need to get the release out. And the roadmap discussion is a great thing to talk about on the dev list for others' input that aren't here. Were there any other topics that anyone that's here want to talk about today? We have a little bit more time before we move on.
Yeah, hi Ben. This is Rahul from Adobe QE team. So, yeah, if we have time, I would like to talk about the karate framework, which we in Adobe developed and raised a PR for that. So, yeah, so that's what I want to talk about.
Sure, we have time if you want to talk about that. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So hi everyone. So I'm Rahul, and with me I have Manoj, and we work for Adobe QE team, Adobe IO QE team. And we were recently introduced to OpenWhisk, and we started using it. And so we were thinking of some testing framework which can be developed so that it can complement the existing Scala-based test cases. So there was a new interesting framework called Karate, which was not recently, but launched in 2016. So we thought of using it to create some behavioral driven scenarios. Because as everyone knows that it's a platform and a lot of business use cases can be derived out of it. So there is a proposal which I can share on the chat as well, which we've created, and you can go about it and ask any questions if you have. So we've already raised a PR. If everyone is fine, we would like it to be introduced to the existing tests, and we can contribute a lot more test cases which can increase our test coverage. And this would also enable us to create different user scenarios which could uncover some issues which the existing the system and the unit level test might not detect. So yeah,
Yeah, I've seen some discussion on the dev list, which is good. It'd be good to keep having that. Some of the discussion centered around basically the overlap with the existing test suite and kind of what the plan is there, whether we want to switch to behavior-driven tests for everything, or whether we want to keep the existing test suite, expand on that in its realm, and if this is covers a whole separate set of testing. What's your feeling and positioning of it as far as, is this kind of a replacement for what the tests we already have, or is this an extra coverage?
Yeah, so our plan is to, as of now, it just complements the existing Scala-based test cases, and it's not porting or moving, switching to the karate-based test cases. So I have answered in the bottom as well, like the question why we want to do this, and is it doubling the test effort? So the answer is we don't have any plans to move to karate-based test cases. It's just that we want to complement and improve our test coverage when it comes to use cases. Because as of now, we have Scala-based system test, integration test, which focuses on functionalities, but we want an easy onboarding of, so I am not familiar with Scala, but I am familiar with Java. So it's like very easy for me to create a scenario and write a test case in Karate. So the idea is to just complement the existing test cases. And in future, if we see a value that, okay, the Karate is growing and this framework, so right now the Karate framework has given the ability to run the feature files using the Gatling framework. So our test cases can be used as performance, and in future they plan to add the UI automation support as well. So like this community is growing, and if in future we find that, okay, moving or switching to Karate is good, then we can probably think of it. But as of now, we just want to complement the existing Scala based test cases.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments around the new test suite proposal?
Would these be gating tests or would these be optional?
Pardon me, please.
Would these be offered as an optional test suite, or would they be gating tests for pull requests and releases? And
yeah, that's a good question. So so right now the plan is to have them optional, so they can run on demand if anybody needs it.
I had a question. So I don't really know very much about karate. Could you sort of talk about what's the maturity of the testing framework? What's the community around it? What's the licensing like? I mean, is this a framework that has widespread use that it makes sense to invest in? I just don't know that framework. I've never heard of it before, which doesn't mean anything. I don't do tests very much.
So if we get a chance, we can show our framework. How we developed it with keeping in the QA's perspective mindset. So that it can increase the quality of the OpenWhisk and our runtime also. So
just before
I guess I'm trying to understand: is karate, isn't it a Apache project? Like, what's the community behind it that's going to keep it around in 3 years from now?
Yeah, it's an MIT project, and so we met the creator of this as well. His name is Peter Thomas, and he's developed he started developing this framework 2 years ago, and this is completely based on Cucumber, and Cucumber is a well-known BDD framework. So the community is growing. It's not that mature as of now, but yes. So it's growing, and the kind of plans they have in mind 2 years down the line, like giving a complete. So they want to make it a one-stop solution, which might suppress Selenium as well, which might suppress the other API testing frameworks like Rest Assured. So they have some big plans around it, but yeah, as of now it's just 2 years old.
Okay.
You mentioned that something about Gatling tests. In the mailing list, we already have Gatling set of Gatling tests for performance. Can you talk about what is the idea using Karate and Gatling?
Yeah, so I can give an example. So say for example, there is a smoke test. Like if we talk about the structure, we have divided our test into different testing types. If we talk about smoke test, and let's say if the smoke test in Karate is testing all the user functions, like creating an action, deleting it, updating it, and so on and so forth. So the new support which they are giving is they have built a plugin which can utilize the Gatling framework to run these feature files as per the load defined. So it's very similar to what the test we have in Scala, the Gatling test we have in Scala. Instead of using the Scala based test file, we can use a feature file. So for example, if I want to create a performance smoke test, so I have a baseline number. Say for example, if 10 concurrent creation of action gives me a response time of say 10 milliseconds. I can have that defined in my Scala-based Gatling test file, which will use my Karate feature file, and that would assert against the response time with which I've already baselined. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 I don't have strong opinions about this karate framework, but I would have just a sentiment that people that are working in Scala, contributing to Scala. So I'm not writing a lot of Scala work. maybe Tyson and Marcus and others are writing more Scala code than me. But from that community, I think Scala test was chosen because that's more a natural thing for Scala developers to write their code, and as they write the code, they use Scala test, so there's a better chance that they know Scala test than this other framework. So maybe that's why it's a good reason to have Scala tests. And we're using it for both, I guess, for unit tests and integration tests. What I'm afraid is, do we add this karate, and then we have Cucumber, and then we have the next framework, and then we have the next framework, and we have the same coverage in 3 different frameworks, and the person that is just trying to patch a bug now needs to write more the same test twice. So that's just a concern, not saying that is a bad idea, but that'll be a concern for those guys that are writing Scala code. Now they have to worry about writing the test case in Cucumber.
Yeah. That was kind of my first reaction as well, was just because it's its own DSL, you have to learn a whole new, it's not like my Scala code's a little different and I can figure that out, right? But I got to learn a whole new, not just testing framework for Scala, but a whole new language essentially to define my tests in. So, not that if the benefits are immense, then it's worth it, right? So it's kind of probably just need to play with it some. Looking through the PR, I don't know, like, have you had a chance, is this integrated with the existing like Gradle builds? Do you have a Travis job and that kind of stuff set up to run these things as part of the PR, so we can kind of look at how the tests actually get run and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that is not being done as of now, but yeah, so the Gradle support can be there. So right now it's like how we are using in Adobe is like we integrate it with Jenkins and just run it as a Maven job. But yeah, we can support. So it has a Gradle support, and we can always do that.
Yeah, so that
I'd like to share the sentiment of the guys speaking before me. What I was the first impression that I got when looking at the pull request, it was, I think it's 8K lines of code or something around that time. Would it be possible to dense that down and to provide a test that is, as you say, complementary to the test that we have today? So it's not duplicating any of the system tests that we have, but so we can see how a test would look like that tests something broader that we have today, and how that makes stuff simpler. Because currently, as the pull request is right now, it's very hard to find to digest and to find what's really the core of it all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So okay. So what we can do is like Marcus, as you suggested, we can have one user workflow, which actually is not an overlap from the of the existing test cases, and then raise a PR, and then you guys can probably take a look like how one scenario works in karate, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because right now it's daunting when I see like there's Java files in there and there's Maven, POM, XMLs, and like it's just like we don't understand exactly, or I don't understand what's needed for this to actually run, or what's just like convention from how you've been running it, but we need to adapt it to how OpenWhisk it's built and its code, right?
So all right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Java files? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's some test runners written in Java, right? So I'd like to know, like, do those need to be Java? Can Scala call these tests, right? Or does it need Maven? Can Gradle call these tests?
I think we went through a lot of effort to. We used to have Java, but I think mainly Marcus. But we went through a lot of effort to disseminate any Java files. So we won't. If we don't have to, we don't want to add them back. Yeah. Also, maybe I don't know. I'm not familiar with karate. IntelliJ. I'm very used to just open it IntelliJ and I right click on a Scala test and I just run the test. I debug the test. I don't know how easy it is to debug. I guess at the end of the day, it's all Java. So I'm not a Java guy. But yeah, I don't know.
So I think Rahul, getting a Travis integration to demonstrate how the tests would run, I think that's a good approach. And then just to point out, I think where these tests, I imagine, would mostly come in is to in the same way that the system tests are currently run. They're like integration tests. And currently inside the system tests, I think there's a few variants of frameworks being used, like Rest Assured, and there's some wrappers around the Whisk API. And I think the question here is, what is the kind of long-term situation for being able to extend the system tests as easily as possible? And in this situation, we have a team that's kind of separate from the OpenWhisk development team that's trying to add more tests to exercise more parts of the system. More integration tests, and doing that as part of OpenWhisk development is really important, and doing it independent of OpenWhisk development is also really important. And so I think this is where Rahul has kind of come from for putting out this idea of using Karate to make it consumable from from not being an OpenWhisk developer, but a OpenWhisk operator.
I see.
Yeah, I can definitely see a value in making it easier for people to write test cases that are coming from the testing community. Like if operators want to beef up the integration tests by getting a test organization involved, getting that to go.
Now I see the value. Yeah, I can see the value on black box testing, right? So this will be black box organization and group.
Yeah, and to sort of the idea is not to replace Scala tests for doing unit tests when you're the developer writing the feature. This is really, we sort of wanted to show a test that did replace a unit test, or a very simple integration test, to be like, okay, here's 1,000 lines of Scala test, and here's 200 lines or whatever it is of the equivalent test in Karate, to be like, hey, it's a little bit more readable, makes a little bit more sense for somebody that's not versed in the minutia of a particular feature inside the OpenWhisk code base. So yeah, these things are meant to be like much longer running, like, hey, we want to have 3 or 4 users. These things need to be happening in parallel. Does everything still work correctly when we're taking this like much broader holistic view of the system, which is why going with a BDD framework makes a lot more sense as opposed to something that's like a very simple, like just an extension of JUnit.
Yeah, so I think we can move on and talk about this in the dev list, but kind of the general feedback seems to be maybe to look at a more isolated pull request just as a first blush to figure out, to see the benefit, to see how it integrates with the build. And then also on the code standpoint, work on the whole Scala versus Karate as far as saving lines of code and stuff, work on that. Like the example on the proposal, the Karate test is longer than the equivalent Scala test, right? So like trying to figure out like what the actual savings as far as writing the test and code reuse and that kind of a thing would be good to enumerate maybe. We're running short on time, so if there's no other immediate concerns or comments, we can again talk about this more on the dev list and iterate on this because the contributions for Test Suite are great, right? It's just fitting things in so that they can be maintained by the community itself.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of writing looking for that line of separation, like Matt was saying in Python, of high level BDD tests versus low level unit tests.
All right. We have a couple more minutes. Probably not enough to start another topic, but I would like to find a moderator for the next call. If the next call will be in 2 weeks, that'd be August 29th. If anybody would like to do it. This is my first time, and it wasn't too hard, so don't be shy. It's a good way to help out.
I could do it if nobody else is clamoring.
Okay, Tyson's got enough. Is there anyone else that would like to do it, or
going once?
Yep. All right, Tyson. I think you're it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This was a great chat, and we look forward to talking about these things more on the dev list.
Yes, guys.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.